Mrs. Maples was so excited about her new grant proposal. She just knew that all the teachers in the district would be just as excited as her and the technology teachers to have some quality embedded PD on integrating technology into instruction. Sure, they hadn't bothered to take her survey, but she just knew she would have buy-in. Shortly after the proposal was submitted, Mrs. Maple's principal, Mr. Timmid, was called to the board office. Seldom a good thing. He was told that all non-tenured teachers would be getting pink slips. Yikes! He was going to have to tell some of his most innovative teachers, including Mrs. Maples, they were not guaranteed a job. What if they moved on? Well, Mrs. Maples wasn't one to play this wait-and-see game, and she found a job at a neighboring school district, where 2 years later, she won a major award.
I won Teacher of the Year. Yay, me! Sorry, Mr. Timmid.
Meanwhile, Mr. Timmid had to find a replacement. He was fortunate enough to find someone qualified to not only teach biology, but to coach the school's football team. Meet Mr. Sports-Minded.
Yeah, sports! Yeah, sports and science and stuff and sports.
Oh, by the way, the grant was funded. Of course, there were some budget modifications due to unforeseen circumstances, and Mr. Timmid wisely decided to put his new teacher, who was also working on his K-tip, in charge of the project. He had, after all, taken Mrs. Maple's position, and this would only be until he could find a volunteer to take over the project. He handed a copy of the proposal to Mr. Sports-Minded and sent him on his way.
Yeah, this will look great on my K-tip folder.
It wasn't long before calls started pouring in and out of the board office.
Ring, ring,
asking
ring,
about
ring.
the project. The funders needed a new budget to reflect those cuts. All those emails pertaining to the project, well, you guessed it, they went to Mrs. Maples, whose email wasn't disabled. No worries. Mr. Sports-Minded had a plan. I know how to fix this budget. We'll just cut teacher stipends. It's not like I can get rid of the consultant. Ha! Who would do the training? Not me.
We're going to state.
Time passed, and soon it was early November. The hornet's nest that consisted of Mrs. Maple's good friends, the board office, and the funders was beginning to swarm. Bzz, bzz, bzz. Attention, attention, please. This is a reminder that we will have a super important staff meeting in the teacher lounge after school. As Mr. Timmid ran down his to-do list with the staff, Mr. Malcontent let the cat out of the bag and asked the big question. Has anyone done anything about Mrs. Maple's grant? As I've said all along, we should have kept her. Now we're in big trouble. By mid-November, the project was months off schedule. Finding himself once again in trouble with the board, Mr. Timmid was now being asked for a 6-month progress report. Yikes! Sure hope Mr. Sports-Minded had that prepared. Surely there is nothing to worry about. As Mr. Sports-Minded thinks,
Think.
trouble is brewing. Mr. Malcontent has discovered from his wife, yeah, she works at the board office, that there is no budget account for this project. He has also shared at Sunday school that Mr. Sports-Minded is cutting all of the teacher stipends to make up for the cuts in the original proposal. Now, the elementary teachers are refusing to take part, and the middle school principal is advising Mr. Timmid to make this PD mandatory, or else they won't have the numbers they need for their funder's final report. Crack the whip and make 'em jump in line, is his advice to Mr. Timmid. Teachers are too touchy-feely anyway. Meanwhile, Mr. Sports-Minded finally read the grant proposal and found his golden ticket. Mrs. Maples had written in a consultant group, Old Dog's New Tricks, a group of retired teachers, and they were going to make everything okay. All they had to do was run PDs every Wednesday after school and fit in some embedded coaching visits. He immediately called Miss Terrier, the leader of the pack, and arranged a meeting. Why, I never heard from you. I assumed that you hadn't been funded. Poor Mr. Sports-Minded. The consultants had already promised a large portion of their 100 allowable days to other projects. Miss Terrier could only agree to provide 2 days of PD on a weekend and no in-school follow-up, coaching included. Mr. Timid thinks he has a pretty good idea to compensate for this inconvenience, and he suggests that they simply ask the technology teachers to run the training. After all, they had attended a state conference a few years back. Surely they had plenty of ideas to share. The best part was they wouldn't need to pay them as much as the consultants.
Cha-ching!
Now he had money to spend elsewhere. Each training team began diligently working on their PD plans. Unfortunately, they weren't able to collaborate. You know, that process where teams have a common goal and shared responsibilities? Shouldn't be a problem. Then it happened. Who could have seen it coming? I mean, really? Snow in February? During the snow days, the teachers were required to come in for their PD. The first workshop was led by the elementary technology teacher and wasn't modified to meet the needs of the middle and high school staff. The first session was also cut from 3 hours to 1 so that the administration meeting could take place. This would meet that state mandate for the needed testing protocol training, and with all this snow, it seemed wise to get it over with. The second workshop was led by the middle school tech department on internet safety. 6 elementary teachers were there simply because they were low on PD hours. But the training was a bit unnecessary for their students, and they spent the day on Facebook.
Hey guys, did you see Mrs. Maple's post about Teacher of the Year?
Mr. Timid's crew was small in numbers. After all, they had their PD time finished, and he was unlikely to say anything to them for missing. Of course, all of the middle school teachers were there. They were afraid of Mr. Hardedge, their principal, and his crack of the whip. But they were so angry with the elementary and high school teachers for not participating that they left bitter and argumentative, resulting in a written report that was filed away at the board office. Yikes! After Mr. Sports-Minded's team made it to the playoffs, he was ready to begin his K-tip. Difficult to imagine, but he had fallen behind. Mr. Timid assigned him a team of teachers to help get it under control before the deadline. He sure didn't want to lose his winning coach. Time for the grant was running out, and the donor was already requesting the results of a technology integration survey. Mr. Timid quickly found a generic survey based on the state requirements and sent it out. The results were terrible. How was it possible that no one was integrating technology? After reviewing the budget, it was discovered that there was still $35,000 of the original $40,000 to be spent. The principals began fighting over how they would divvy up the purse. Boy, did politics begin to get ugly. The middle school principal, Mr. Hardedge, had a network of support built around the cornhole crowd he tossed the corn sacks with in the summer. The elementary principal was able to purchase her laptops, but was certain she had been marginalized because she was Presbyterian and the rest of the administrators were Baptist. She had a good friend who worked in the State Department, and she was ready to report the handling of this project all the way to the top. After all, she was signed on as a partner when Mrs. Maples asked for support. Why hadn't she been consulted on how to spend the money? Feelings were hurt, reputations were ruined, confusion set in. No one in the district was speaking. The laptops didn't work with the district's operating system, so they can't be used for inputting grades or website construction. They can, however, play YouTube in World of Warcraft. The middle school teachers are planning a coup to get rid of Mr. Hardedge and will have nothing more to do with this project. The high school teachers have no opinion one way or the other. They are upset because they lost their new winning coach, who was unable to pass his K-tip and had to quit. The superintendent has decided to take this project out of the hands of the principals and hand it over to a team of teachers that will be responsible for planning and implementing the rest of the project. Good news! He's chosen you to be the team leader. Best of luck. Hope you can play cornhole.